Good evening and welcome to Houston Public Library series on critical conversations. Joining me this evening is Irene Breeze, who is really the wonderful founder, director, creativity, artist behind the movement called Lovescaping. And Lovescaping is all about building the humanity of tomorrow by practicing love in action. Building the humanity of tomorrow by practicing love in action. The society, the world needs this more today than ever before. We're going to talk about lovescaping in the context of how it fits in with civic engagement, how it fits in with human beings developing more empathy. So just tell us a little bit about yourself, about the background of lovescaping, and how do you see lovescaping changing the landscape of how human beings, adults particularly, interact with other adults?
Sure.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, Larry. So lovescaping is the work of my life, and I am a lovescaper. And my mission is to bring lovescaping to all human beings around the world, because lovescaping seeks to answer this very simple question: where do we learn to love? And that is a question that we don't ask often enough. And in fact, we assume that we're going to learn to love at home, or that we're just going to know what love is by virtue of being born. And what happens if I grow up in a home where I didn't receive love, or where I was told that I'm loved and I'm abused, for instance? Perhaps I grow up associating love with abuse. So we really start here because we need to recognize that love is something that we need to learn and teach in a very intentional way. And so my life experience has taught me that love is not a feeling, love is an action that we can learn to embody. And so when I look at our world and I look at across our differences, really when we bring in empathy, compassion, humility, respect, honesty, I'm naming there some of the pillars that underpin the philosophy of lovescaping. When we bring these ingredients, what happens is remarkable. Communities flourish because we can understand each other across our differences. Not love each other despite our differences, but love each other because of our differences. So it's like developing a common language, a language of love, in which we can agree and disagree, and we can engage in critical conversations, but through the lens of love. And so lovescaping is practicing love in action through the intentional and purposeful engagement of its 15 pillars. And they include, I would argue, universal values like the ones I mentioned: solidarity, respect, honesty, empathy. Because if you think about it, love is not a single entity. There cannot be love without humility, without honesty, without care, without forgiveness. And so we, as Lovescaping, our mission as an organization is that schools become places where we can learn to practice love in action, so that if we're not getting it at home, we're getting it at school. And we involve everybody in the learning community. So we lovescape with teachers, we lovescape with families. So it's really going beyond just saying, I know what these words mean. We can all recognize these pillars, but where do we learn to actually practice? And what does it mean to be humble? How do I truly embody that? What does it mean to practice empathy? What does empathic listening look like, sound like? So we really bring the curriculum alive. And we are in schools, in public schools, pre-K through 12th grade, working with everybody in the learning community to introduce and build a culture of love from the ground up. So when you were asking about adults, right, the invitation that we do with Lovescaping is an invitation to unlearn where necessary. Because again, if we have been taught all our lives, or if we grew up in a home where maybe my love was conditional on, certain expectations, or it was possessive and there was a lot of jealousy and control, I have to unlearn that to learn that love liberates, and liberation is one of the pillars of lovescaping. So it's hard work, and it's heart work. It's the work of the heart. And it's really, we realize that in order to change mindsets, we need to touch hearts. And so Lovescaping offers a methodology and a framework where we can really bring our walls down and truly connect heart to heart as human beings. We can be vulnerable and really open our hearts and see that everybody has a story, that we really are all icebergs. What we see is the tip. But when we get to know one another, what's under the surface, what's below the water, and we get to open our hearts and reveal the complexity of being human, because being human is hard and complex, and we will start seeing that there are so many similarities across the differences, and we can learn to empathize. And so it provides an intentional space for healing, an intentional space for connection, an intentional space to, again, to bring down those guards and really get to know one another and build that community and build that trust.
This actually, to me, reminds me that in the environment we have in schools across this country, that there's a whole generation or two or three that did not get some of the things you're talking about in school. We used to talk about EI, emotional intelligence, that we would teach. We used to talk about character, education, and development. There was even something called the 40 developmental assets that we used to teach for a while. None of that occurs anymore. So you get adults who have not had this foundational kind of background to build upon. As you mentioned, when we become adults, we have no proper lens or no proper filters to understand the other, who may be different than myself, who does not look like me, to enter into a common exchange of experiences and respecting each other's experiences that may be different. Different is different, amen, period. Not better than, not more than, not less than, just different. Everyone's daily lived experiential realities are just different. To build the ability to have deep listening with sincerity and honesty, to understand where the person's coming from, so that you can enter into their thinking both cognitively, effectively, and behaviorally. To talk about the change that they have gone through, listening to the change that you have gone through, and as you said so clearly and so well, how do we find that common ground? How do we find those things we have in common more than we have in our differences? Because that's what we build upon, is it not?
Absolutely. And you know, it's remarkable what happens when we bring these lovescaping spaces in schools, because it's a very unusual space, and in many ways, you know, the whole system, I personally believe the whole educational system needs to be transformed. It's still, we're operating from a very, antiquated, irrelevant system. And so, but lovescaping offers a sort of oasis within that quite dysfunctional system that's very dehumanizing. And so when we build in the time for us to sit in a circle and express our deepest thoughts and feelings, I mean, that's one of the favorite parts of both the adults and the children of lovescaping, the ability to actually be heard. Because every human being wants and needs to be heard, to be valued, seen, and embraced. And so it's really intentionally, and that's one of the words that underpins lovescaping, intentionality. We have to be very intentional about all of, about practicing humility, about practicing empathy. We can't just leave it up to luck, and we constantly have to be reminded and check ourselves and develop that self-awareness that will allow us to constantly improve, and that's really humility. And so we start with humility, because without humility, there can't be empathy. And so
it really is practicing unconditional love.
Absolutely.
And the thing I love about lovescaping, we have to all become more comfortable even with the concept again of love. When we talk about unconditional love, many times people still feel uncomfortable. But to be able to put yourself in the place as a student, as a child, particularly as an adult, to be in a place where you can feel comfortable not only giving unconditional love, but receiving unconditional love, because it's a two-way street, becomes the ability to talk about this heart thing that you mentioned. And my definition of heart has always been helping each achieve real tomorrows. So human beings were meant not just to thrive, not even to survive, but to flourish. So lovescaping gives adults a way to look at themselves in a deeper manner, to figure out the things they need to work on, basically doing our own work first, so that we can open that space in our heart to receive, so that we can understand how to help each human being flourish to the fullness of their God-given potential and ability. I think that's the piece when we come into civic engagement spaces, when people come together to dialogue around hard social, economic, political issues. We're so in our camps, we're so in our mind We're so in our tribes, we're so in our understanding, we don't take the time to listen to the other human being, to understand their plight, their history, their experiences. So we butt heads automatically. Lovescaping gives it a chance to really open up. I kind of see like this flowering kind of developing in slow motion and just opening up to another human being.
Yes.
And I think that's the beauty of it.
Yes, I agree. And actually that image of like opening up, and that's actually the cover of my book is an opening of the heart. And it is that, and it is the illustration for vulnerability, and it is that opening of the heart. And I love how you express it, and I agree with you that our aim is to flourish as human beings. And one of the things that we're unapologetic about is calling it love and reclaiming love. And it's interesting because when we were starting off, as I started, there were some people who were skeptical about the name Lovescaping, and they said, this idea of love, like this is gonna be, people are gonna think it's wishy-washy, and it's like, this is the opposite of that. This is hard work. It's hard work, and it's hard work because it really is an invitation to change, transition from fear to love. Because our history, I would argue the history of humanity is built on a history of fear. A lot of it, right? Our institutions. Think about it, even how sometimes we parent, how we seek control by threats, by manipulation. And it is much easier to use fear. Fear works, but only up until a certain point. Right. It's never sustainable, and nobody flourishes under fear, right? We're only in compliance under fear. But we all flourish with love. And so it's this invitation to really choose the hard road. And we call it I call it the yellow road, the hard road. The other road, the easy road is fear. But it's a choice we make. And because it is much harder to be patient, to be compassionate and empathetic. That takes much more work than it is to yell and scream to get what I want, right? But it's up to us to decide what kind of humanity do we want to live? What kind of system do we want to live? I want my students, my colleagues, everybody in my community to listen to me and respect me because they love me, not because they fear me. And so that's one of the hardest challenges, that if we're used to using fear as a means to control or as a means to get what we want, how do we unlearn that and transition to say, no, love is really where everybody will flourish.
And I think for adults, the challenge is to get them out of their heads, to get it here.
Yes.
I mean, we have to take all this nonsense, all this noise, all this distraction, all the media, all the social media, all the stuff we hear, read from here and process it. I call it the internalizing process of human beings, moving from here to here. When I think and reflect on all that I see and take in and absorb as knowledge that passes for information, that passes for education, when I stop and reflect and meditate with intentionality and mindfulness, what does my heart tell me about what I think? How do I move from my thinking to my feelings that changes my behaviors? So that head, heart, and gut thing becomes very important, the cognitive affective behavioral, because we're talking about change, right? And change is an internal process. You don't get from here to here without some kind of internal process happening to the human being. So let me ask this question because we're out of time. What's the next step you see in the evolution of where we can perhaps bring adults the understanding that this work going forward, I told somebody the other day I was a lovescaper. They looked at me like, but it gave me a great opportunity to explain.
Yes.
All right?
Yes.
And once I explained it, they said, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. Because I'm just trying to get you to understand in this country, one of the big issues is equity. How do we get to equity in all kinds of programming and all kinds of responses to ills, to needs, to social responsibilities, to inadequate funding of things? The road to equity is through empathy. There is no equity without empathy. So if this helps adults become more empathetic, then I got a chance to talk about equity. So that's what excites me about lovescaping. It's a great concept to develop to get people to think, feel, and act in a different way.
Absolutely. And I think we have to start, when the beauty of doing this within schools is that we can really work with the whole learning community. So we're starting early with the new generation. We're starting with the 3-year-olds, right? So that they grow up to be lovescapers. And we're also working with their families and with their teachers, who again, it's much harder work because we've all been programmed. There's so much deep programming we have to do and unlearning we have to do. But it is through what you said, it's through the touching of the heart to get into that feeling space. So the more we can share the message and invite adults into this space where we actually take them through a journey, and it's not a training, it's not a program, it's a process. And it's a heart shift and a mind shift.
And you're willing to do your own work. Yeah, this is a lot of work that you have to do yourself.
Absolutely.
It's about the other, engaging in a different way with the other, but it's first about you.
Right, exactly. And you need to, and we all need to do the healing work.
Yeah.
And it starts with us, so that then we can lovescape others. So I think it's just, one community at a time, one school at a time, and thank you for supporting our mission, Larry.
Well, the movement has started. The movement has begun.
Yes.
You're now on the ground floor of the movement. You will hear more about lovescaping going forward. We have no doubt it will catch on and become one of those things, the tool in the arsenal kit that everybody needs, because we can't go on to where we're going in this totally divided reality. Human beings were not meant to be at odds with each other as we are on so many myriads list of issues. We have to figure out middle ground, a common ground, compromise, moving forward. It is this kind of understanding, more as you said, what do we really have in common, more than what our differences are. And those things can be discovered because they have throughout history, but it takes time, it takes work, it takes willingness, it takes humility, it takes courage.
Yes.
First of all, honestly admit and own up to that we have a reality that's not working. Not working for half the country on this side, not working for the other half of the country on this side. Therefore, it's not working. So it becomes clear that lovescaping is that kind of future thing, bringing it into the present, that can begin to change those hearts and minds, change behaviors. I've always said if you change the narrative, you change the outcome. So this is about narrative change, creating a whole new spectrum. We cannot thank you enough for bringing lovescaping to us. We're going to continue to follow your work as this movement grows. I want to thank everybody for joining us and being part of this. We'll continue to post where you can find and follow Irene through lovescaping. And we're going to just say thank you for now. Join us in future segments of Critical Conversations here at Houston Public Library. Until then, until we see each other again, until we come back together, always stay well, be safe, and peace, power,